Hey, good afternoon. This is Wen, your instructor from OSCM 3340. In this short video, I'm going to help you do a brief walkthrough on your homework number 3. Specifically, I'm going to help you make sense of second problem. Okay? So I know that when sometimes homework a little too challenging, you'd like to seek some help from outside, but rather than seek help from outside, occasionally I make a video like this to help you. Okay, so rather get help from outside, get help from inside. Okay, that is my spirit. So here the second homework goes like the Maggie's French fries study. Okay, if you look at your textbook page number 3, there's original problem description. It's basically somebody is trying to study this French fries restaurant by drawing a sample. This person is studying 2 different locations. So the first question is compare the mean of two different locations, 1 and 2. Then establish a statistical significance on your results. Please comment on your results. So this is basically let you comparing mean of 2 different locations. So if you open up the data, let me see where the data is. Okay, let's open up the data. It's taking some time. Okay, now we got the data. So if you look at here in this particular data, you have a location variable ranging from 1 and 2, right? There's a divider here. It's very convenient. It helps you jump around. Make sure you click Control and arrow key. It will help you jump up and down. And you have a fry number. It's more like I think it's more like identification number, right? And then this is your container number, order size, and length. Okay, visual inspection result. So I believe the first question is asking you to compare the length of your fries between 2 different locations. Okay, remember this is a sample of he or she draw sample of 488 from location 1 and maybe another same number. I can't quite tell what's the number of sample from location 2, but anyway, there's samples from each locations, so you need to compare whether there's any difference between location 1 in their length and location 2 in their length. So if you remember, this is not work through, this is a walkthrough. Okay, I'm not going to work through this walkthrough. So I mean, if you understand what this is all about, yes, you are correct. This is going to be a t-test. Okay, comparing two group means using t-tests. I think because we don't have any assumptions about 2 locations have the same variations, okay, or variance, I'm sorry, you can just use unequal variance in the Excel analysis tool pack. Okay, if you understand that part, you can just go ahead and do this. Okay, and in general, I mean, before I move on to the next question, I think I won't demonstrate how to do the t-tests here because we've done that enough in the class. Okay, and maybe let's take a look at the question number 2, and then I'll offer some brief explanation about what we're trying to do in here, and then I can offer a more specific information about completing the number 2, which a lot of you may find it's more puzzling. The number 2 is asking compare the non-conforming rate between 2 locations. Okay, it's another type of tests, but in this time, this is going to be the test of proportion rather than the test of mean. Okay, both of them trying to find out the difference. But first one is trying to find out the difference between mean. Second one is trying to find the difference between proportion. So we did proportion finding in homework number 1. The homework number 2 is letting you compare 2 different proportions. That's what it is. So in general sense, if you look at here, consider as location 1 location 2, they're making infinite number of fries every day, and we're trying to infer whether there's any difference or not. So when you try to compare whether there's any difference between mean, you have used the point estimator called mean difference. Okay, this is difference in terms of mean. For the second question, it is asking whether there's any difference between population proportion, but unfortunately, because we do not know population proportion, we can only use sample proportion to estimate the actual difference between two different locations. Okay, we know that this particular statistic follows T distribution. Okay, and then I did not teach this part in class, but I assume that you can understand after you know what you're doing. Okay, so this thing, let me make it more clear here. This thing follows T distribution. This thing follows actually the Z distribution. Okay, so anytime if you are estimating something, you need to find out what distribution it is using. Okay, so T distribution is what it's using, and the difference between proportions is using the Z distribution. Okay, so once you know what's the shape, you need to know what is the average, you need to know what is the standard error of this particular estimate or this particular distribution, because this distribution is about the type of sample differences you'll be drawing from these two groups. Okay, again, this distribution is about all the possible sample differences. This distribution is about all the possible sample proportion differences. Okay, so with this in hand, you can easily calculate the difference. Using Excel, calculate what is average proportion for location 1, what is average proportion of location 2, and you calculate the result. Okay, let's say this is dp bar, and again, this will be following this particular distribution with average of something with standard error of something. So standard error, you can take a look at this reference I added. This is basically the adding two variants from each group together and square root it. Okay, and the average is we're assuming 0. I hope you still can remember all the likelihood of surprise rhetoric I have discussed in the class, because this distribution tells us a story about all the possible proportion differences. So what is the likelihood of drawing this type of sample differences given the average is actually 0? Okay, so that is what we are trying to find out. So eventually you're going to feed in that all the values into norm, dist, your drawed sample difference, the mu 0, and the standard error, and true. And this will tell you what is the probability of drawing, okay, what is the likelihood of drawing this type of sample when the proportion difference is actually 0. Okay, so let's say your dp is somewhere here, and what this function, what this Excel formula tells you is that how likely it is for you to draw sample like this when the actual difference is 0, when there's no difference. So with this explained, what I'm going to do, I'm going to demonstrate in Excel real quick. Okay, so I'm not going to do the actual I column because I column is one thing for you to find out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this particular visual inspection part. So I'm going to take a look at whether there's any proportion difference in terms of broken fries. Okay, so let me do a little bit of treatment. Broken fries. If it is broken fries, it is going to report 1. Otherwise, it's going to report 0. Okay. If it's broken, 1. Otherwise, 0. Oops. For some reason it's not working. Let me just finish it in old fashion. Okay, I'm done. So I remember in the middle there's 2 empty cells. I need to clean those. So with this arrangement, I can actually calculate the proportion. Okay, so proportion is actually, you can do it, let's say, location 1, location 2. You can do in old fashion, sum of k the way to n divided by K491. So the first part is counting total number of ones. The second part is counting total numbers. So in this fashion, it's going to tell you what is the proportion. Okay, you can either do the same or you can either do the average. It's going to do the same thing, okay? So the proportion is actually the average when everything is measured in 1 and 0. Okay, so one group has about 6%, one group has about 5%. The difference here is actually location 1 minus location 2. It's about 1% difference. So the question is it really different? Is it really different? If this person go out and draw another group of samples, you will almost certainly see a different result here. Okay, if he draw another group of samples, the third samples, you will certainly see another different result in here. All these different results will form a sampling distribution of population proportion difference. That's what it is. Okay, so with that, let's calculate standard error. Our mean, hypothesized mean here. For now, let's take a look. Let's just put it 0 here. Okay, and then standard error. Standard error. Because it's fairly long equation, so I'd like to separate it. Oops. Okay. Standard error for, let's say, variance location 1, variance for location 2. So if you remember, the equation here is fairly long, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate this part and this part first, and then simplifying it by just putting the sum of these two components with a square root of them. So it's going to be this proportion multiply 1 minus this proportion divided by the number of samples. What's the number of samples? Oops, I don't know what's the number of samples. So let's go to, okay, so again, let me just count how many are there, and maybe I can just reutilize this value. Okay, one group has 380, one group has 488. Let me double check. Okay. Yeah, this one has a 380, as you can see from here, this part of screen. And this one has 488. Okay, it says 489 because we included the column head, so it's correct. Okay, now I'm ready. So P multiply 1 minus P divided by sample size. Another one, multiply 1 minus this guy divided by the sample size. Okay, these two tells the variance. Now I'm ready to calculate standard error. It's going to be square root of this guy plus this guy. Okay, so it's plausible size. And then let's calculate the p-value. Norm, this difference is this. And then mean is 0. Standard error is this. Cumulative, true. It's 74.5%. So we got a fairly big p-value in here. So what does it tell us? It tells us how likely it is for you to draw a sample like this, given there is no difference between two groups. Okay, so it turns out that it's fairly likely that you can draw sample result like this. Okay, you can construct a confidence interval. Well, let's calculate margin of error first. Your margin of error is going to be, I know it's not a part of the homework, but it's going to be nice. Sorry, I got interrupted for a second. So let's go back. We're calculating confidence interval, not 1.96, multiply by the standard error, which is this. Okay, so your confidence interval, the upper bound is going to be your difference plus the margin of error, and confidence interval lower bound is going to be the difference minus the margin of error, which is less than 0, which is not very likely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this treatment. Pick this value or 0, whichever larger. So the margin of error is the difference is somewhere between 0% to 4%. 0% to 4%. But our sample is, I'm sorry. This is an interval where we believe, or where we can say with 95% confidence, the actual population difference is reside, which in our case is actually 0 in here. Okay, I hope whole thing made sense to you. That I think with this you have enough information to proceed to conduct proportion difference test on column I. Okay, column I. So thank you, and you can send me an email and send me a comment. Anything you want to know more, or anything I failed to clarify, or things like that. Okay, thanks for your patience. See you in the next video. Thanks.